So Feanor is being Feanor, and he decides he wants to make something extra awesome, so he spends a very long time putting forth all his strength and his skill, and at last he makes the Silmarils. Nobody knows what they were actually made of. They looked like diamonds, but they were far stronger, and in them he captured the light of the trees of Valinor, so that they shone and glowed even in the deepest darkness. So now everyone's like, yo Feanor, those are awesome, and Varda blesses them so that nothing evil can touch them without being burned, and Mandos foretells that the entire fate of Arda is bound up in them. Melkor sees them and he becomes super envious, so he starts trying really hard to screw everything up. He starts sowing lies among the Noldor to turn them against the Valar and against each other. He reveals to the elves the secret that men are going to one day come to Middle-earth, and he tells them that the Valar want to eventually wipe out the elves so that they can rule the weaker-minded men. Because of Melkor's lies, unrest is spread among the Noldor, and they become all the more prideful and desiring of new lands to conquer. Feanor, of course, desired this most of all, and he began to love the Silmarils with an even more greedy love than before, hoarding them to himself, so that no matter how hard Melkor tried, he could never get close to them. But Melkor would not give up, so he began to sow seeds of division between Feanor and his half-brothers, claiming that Fingolfin and Finarfin would try to usurp the throne from Finwë. But he also said to Fingolfin and Finarfin that eventually Feanor would try to drive them from Tirion, so for the first time the elves started secretly forging weapons to one day use against each other. So Feanor has a big mouth, and he starts openly talking about rebelling against the Valar and leaving for Middle-earth. Finwë is a little concerned, naturally, so he calls a council of all the lords of the Noldor. Fingolfin gets up and he says, "Hey Dad, you want to do something about our loudmouth brother?" But Feanor struts in, fully armed, and pulls his sword on Fingolfin, and he's like, "You talking smack about me, bro? Get out." Fingolfin tries to ignore him and he bows to Finwë and starts to leave, but Feanor pulls him aside again and points his sword against his chest and he's like, "Talk bad about me to Dad again and I'll kill you." Again, Fingolfin ignores him and walks away, but Feanor did this like in the middle of town, so literally everyone saw. Up to this point, the Valar had been letting the elves do what they wanted, because, free will and all. But now that Feanor is pulling swords on his brothers, they're like, we gotta do something about this. So they bring Feanor before the whole council of Valar, and he tells the whole story, and they find out that Melkor is the one behind all of the unrest that's been going on. So Tolkis takes off to go find him, but meanwhile Mandos says to Feanor, "You still drew a sword on your brother, so go in the timeout corner and think about what you've done for 12 years. Then if Fingolfin forgives you, you can come back." And Fingolfin is like, "Yeah, sure, I forgive him," but Feanor is still Feanor, so he stays stubbornly unrepentant and leaves and builds a new house out in the wilderness with all his sons, and eventually Finwë comes too because ultimately he's a complete sucker for his first son. So Melkor hears about all this and he knows that Tolkis is looking for him, so he runs and hides and the Valar can't find him. He sneaks over to Feanor's house and he's like, "Hey, buddy, I could take you to Middle-earth so we can keep those Silmarils nice and safe, you know what I mean?" But Feanor's like, "Ha, I know what you're after, you fiend," and he slams the door in his face. So Melkor's a little mad, but he just leaves Valinor and goes back to Middle-earth. So for a little while it seems like everything's okay in Amen, but it's not. It's really not. And deep down everybody knows that all their happiness is going to come to a disastrous end. So Melkor gets away, and he jukes out all the Valar and Maiar that are looking for him by sneaking back to Amen, and in a dark ravine to the far south of the island, he finds Ungoliant. Nobody knows what she really was, whether she was a Maya or some creature of the void that existed before Middle-earth was made. But she looked like a big ol' spider sucking up all the light that came close to her. She was always hungry and never satisfied. Now Melkor comes to her, looking again like a big imposing dark lord, and he says to her, "Help me out and I'll give you whatever you want, no matter what it is." And meanwhile he's thinking, "Yeah, right, I totally will." And I don't think Ungoliant really trusted him, but she went with him anyway, weaving a cloak of darkness around them, and webs for them to cross the mountains towards Valinor. At this time the Valar were partying, again, and just about everyone was there, even Feanor, because Manwë was like, "Seriously, you have to come." But Finwë didn't go, and neither did the Noldor who had followed Feanor to his new home out in the mountains, or wherever they were. Also, all of the Teleri stayed at their home by the sea. But Feanor comes, not wearing his party clothes, I might add, and he meets with Fingolfin before Manwë's throne so that they can be reconciled. And Fingolfin is like, "We cool, bro, I love you, and I'll follow you wherever you go." And Feanor, being Feanor, is just like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Right as this is happening, Melkor and Ungoliant come to Valinor and the mound where the two trees are. Melkor cuts them down, and Ungoliant sucks up all of their sap, poisoning them down to their roots. Valinor falls into darkness that only Manwë's eyes can pierce, until he finds a darkness that not even he can penetrate, and he realizes that this was Melkor's doing. Immediately, Tolkis and Orome take off to capture Melkor, but the foul darkness that Ungoliant made confounded them, and they lost their way, and Melkor was long gone.